In fact, since the solar-powered calculator was invented back in the 1970s, the industry has prioritized innovation on solar panels over solar-powered consumer gadgets. But that could be changing. Just to give you an idea how large the trucks are here at the Syncrude mine that are taking the oil sands away, this is one of the tires for the largest vehicle here. It can carry 400 tons a load. That's 200 barrels of oil. That control board really getting mixed reviews here in Puerto Rico. Some believe it will help Puerto Rico get its financial house in order. Others believe it's a new form of colonization for an island with a long colonial past. What I found particularly interesting was just how much access major American CEOs got to this event, Rochelle. We saw the CEOs of IBM, Cisco, and Microsoft side by side with trade ministers. This is where Tranlin's paper will come from. Leftover corn stalks and corn husks that a lot of farmers just throw away. The U.S. government has paid for 40 billboards around Puerto Rico warning people about the dangers of Zika. But the island has to balance precaution against the reality that they need tourism dollars. Today was the day when Puerto Rico was supposed to pay $2 billion of its debt. It was not able to do so. It did default, only being able to pay about half of its debt. And instead, the governor has now declared a state of emergency in about 4 agencies, essentially making it possible to protect essential services while it restructures its debt under the bill that passed earlier this week, known as PROMESA.
We have told the entire world that what we have always been saying is that when the time came to decide between Puerto Ricans or Wall Street, we would always decide to pay the Puerto Ricans.
We traveled to the town of Arecibo, Puerto Rico, about an hour west of San Juan, and that is where they are erecting a statue of Christopher Columbus. He is, of course, known for discovering the United States and for launching decades of colonization here in Puerto Rico. Well, people here say that the bill passed this week, known as PROMESA, is also a form of colonization because it installs an unelected board to make financial decisions for the people of Puerto Rico. Unlike many we spoke to this week in San Juan, the people in Arecibo we spoke to support PROMESA.
It would be a relief for Puerto Ricans that the governors that come to govern have the capacity and the money to move the country forward. I hope it fixes what the politicians have done here. Hopefully we move forward because so many taxes and requirements makes it harder.
Clearly, PROMESA doesn't save the island from default. That will still impact its ability to borrow. And going forward, this bill does not have any tax breaks or financial incentives to help Puerto Rico pay off the rest of its $70 billion in debt. Jessica Stone, CCTV, San Juan, Puerto Rico. It is the end of the line for Pfizer's $160 billion takeover of rival Allergan. The two drug makers have called it quits. Just 2 days ago, the U.S. government cracked down on company mergers designed to slash corporate taxes. They're called corporate inversions. Allergan CEO said, quote, "It really looked like they did a very fine job of constructing a rule to stop this deal, and obviously it was successful." Governments around the world are trying to block the loss of billions when companies leave for nations with lower corporate tax rates. But no major economy has a bigger problem than the United States, where the top corporate tax rate is 39%. That's triple what Ireland charges some of its companies, which is why U.S. companies are acquiring businesses in countries like Bermuda and Ireland. The Irish have already welcomed inversions from major U.S. tech companies like Apple and Google. By some estimates, these inversions add up to losses of more than $100 billion and the U.S. government says they will continue. The question is, will this new U.S. rule stop the bleeding? Jessica Stone, CCTV, Washington. With less than 48 hours before the British vote on whether to leave the European Union, 2 of the world's key central banks are bracing for the outcome. Fears of a falling pound and euro have European Central Bank President Mario Draghi on edge.
It would be difficult also to speculate about one outcome instead of another. And so let me just say that we are trying to be ready to cope with all possible contingencies.
And U.S. Central Bank Chair Janet Yellen issued a veiled warning Tuesday during her biannual address before Congress.
It's up for them to decide. I'm simply saying the decision could have economic consequences that would be relevant to the U.S. economic outlook that we need to monitor carefully.
Yellen has said the so-called Brexit vote figures into the Fed's calculations on raising interest rates, just as she did last week. Yellen appeared less optimistic about U.S. economic growth this year, maintaining a cautious approach that reduced 4 potential interest rate increases to just 2 before the end of 2016. In addition to slower Chinese growth and plummeting oil prices, she cited the lower-than-expected U.S. job growth in May and the 500,000 Americans who stopped looking for work.
It is important for us to see ongoing progress in the labor market. So that's something we want to carefully evaluate and is a focus of our attention.
Interest rates in the United States have now been near zero since 2008. Yellen gave no sign of when the committee will raise them next. The governors meet again in late July. Some members of the U.S. Congress expressed concern that a prolonged period of low interest rates could encourage speculation in equities, for example. But Yellen said the threat of that is low, though she said it does bear watching. Jessica Stone, CCTV, Washington. Since January, when international sanctions against Iran were lifted, Tehran has hosted world leader after world leader after world leader, all intent to do business. Just last month, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi pledged as much as $500 million to develop the Iranian port of Chabahar, a gateway for India to markets in Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. But the deal has come under pressure from American lawmakers questioning whether it violates U.S. sanctions that have not been lifted. That's causing jitters among big banks, the only ones that can finance multi-billion-dollar deals like the Airbus sale of 118 planes to Iran. It's worth an estimated $27 billion U.S. dollars.
More than 10% of the components in the Airbus are American, so we need permission to finalize the contract from an agency called OFAC.
Even though the transaction isn't American, OFAC, the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, still gets a say in whether deals like the Airbus sale can go through. Amma Adams advises U.S. companies about doing business in Iran at the law firm Baker Botts.
If you have a product that's manufactured in the United States and it's sent abroad to China or to Chile or to the UK, it's still subject to U.S. export controls because that product itself is of U.S. origin.
On Wednesday, Airbus's sales director told the Wall Street Journal that the lack of U.S. approval is the main obstacle to the deal. Adams says many global corporations are still trying to determine how they can do business with Iran without running afoul of the U.S. banking system.
One of the issues we're seeing companies grapple with is the fact that U.S. financial institutions and the U.S. financial system remains blocked to the Iranian market.
Even though the SWIFT global financial transaction network has reconnected a number of banks to Iran, Iran's central bank governor says progress has been slow.
In general, we are not able to use our frozen funds abroad unless serious efforts are made by our partners to make the JCPOA work. In my view, they have not honored their obligations.
In recent months, the U.S. Treasury Department has made an effort to educate U.S. companies on how and when to invest in Iran, but the U.S. sanctions against Iran continue to remain a hurdle. Jessica Stone, CCTV, Washington. For 20 years, Rica China in Bayamon has fed the neighborhood and beyond. It's the oldest Chinese restaurant in this Puerto Rican community.
It's fast. You don't have to wait too much to eat. And it's wonderful because all the Puerto Ricans around, they like a lot of food. And over here, when you ask for a plate, it comes real packed.
Juan Chang arrived in Puerto Rico 30 years ago from Guangzhou province and quickly fell in love with his new home.
Well, in the beginning it was a paradise, but in the last couple of years, things have gotten bad because of the economy.
That's also when, Juan says, robbers broke into the apartment above the restaurant.
They pointed their guns at the cooks, asking for money. But because they're not owners, they have little money. Then the criminals started to break things and eventually left.
After tax breaks expired in 2006, manufacturers abandoned the island. Jobs went with them. Nearly half of the population here lives in poverty. Juan believes he and other Chinese restaurant owners are easy targets. It's no secret they run cash businesses and often stash their money at home. Juan says his brother also owns a restaurant. He says one night back in April, he came home after work to a back door broken and missing cash and valuables. No one broke in to Kui Shunzhen's restaurant at the mall. Armed robbers instead burst into her home in April. They demanded $5,000 cash and threatened to kill her young daughter.
With 3 guns, yes. They made me sit in the living room. And one criminal held me like this, with the gun like this. And then a second criminal went into my daughter's room.
The experience changed her.
3 years ago, it wasn't like this. A lot of criminals have been going to Chinese businesses and Chinese homes.
8 cameras all around the building. Juan is taking precautions. 8 security cameras around the restaurant and a guard posted outside the front door. At $2,200 a month, he says, it's the new cost of doing business in Puerto Rico.